Always trust.
We ask the questions.
What is needed in the world?
Is that going to
Gost emisije Recite Al Jazeeri je Jason Barrett, šef odjela za obavještajne informacije iz javnih izvora, bolje poznato kao OSINT, u Uredu Direktora za Nacionalnu sigurnost SAD-a. To je krovna organizacija koja koordiniše rad svih 17 obavještajnih agencija širom SAD-a. Jason, hello and welcome to the Al Jazeera Balkans channel, and thank you so much for taking time to speak to us. Now, let me start by asking you, back in the 1970s and 1980s, intelligence services began to shift some of their information gathering activities away from covert activities to information that was freely or even officially published. And, even though social media had not yet made the scene back then, there was plenty of information that was, like newspapers and public available databases that contained very interesting and very useful information for intelligence agencies. Was this the beginning of what is today known as OSINT?
Haroon, it's a pleasure to join you today, and I appreciate this the opportunity to talk about OSINT. This is really one of those times in which the explosion of information really requires greater awareness on the part of not just governments, but the populations that are in each country. And as you reference, in the 70s and 80s, there was certainly a shift in how certain types of information were collected and acquired by governments. But really, the origins of OSINT predate that time frame and stretch back decades before that. The actual open source or the collection of publicly available information by the U.S. government formally really originated in the 1940s and ultimately then migrated into the intelligence community via the absorption of some of that work by CIA. And then over the years, what has happened is there's been a steady increase in the amount of attention in this space. But really, if you look back in the 50s, for example, when Soviet tanks were rolling into the capital of Hungary, and you had a situation where we as the United States, we weren't collecting on that real time from a covert perspective, at least not to the extent that we could from an open source perspective. So many of our officers were listening in real time to the situation on the ground in the 50s when that happened via radio. And then as you continue over the next couple of decades, what ended up happening is more and more of the information that we were really relying on was found in publicly available sources, whether that's books, journals, academic sources, think tanks, you name it. There was a voracious appetite on our part for more and more information in that space. And so, as you alluded to, there's definitely history in this space, but it's much more of a humble beginning when you think about the distribution platforms that we have now compared to what we had even in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. So.
Now, if we take into consideration that, over the last couple of years, a lot more information is available on Telegram, on social media platforms, even on commercially available satellites. This has been quite a revolution when it comes to OSINT, hasn't it?
It really has. I think this is really a story of the digitalization of information and how over time the growth of open source information really reflects how technology has changed the world. And so over the last 30 to 40 years, for example, we've really just seen a proliferation of platforms when it comes to the type of information that is publicly and commercially available. And I think really that's something that I want to underscore here for your audience who may be interested in learning more about open source information. Over the last 20 years, we've really seen the growth in this space, and I'm sure they've even seen some of it without even realizing it. So if they've ever opened their phone and gone to a search engine and looked up an image of a country far away that might have been taken from a satellite, that's commercial satellite imagery, and we would consider that an adjacent collection capability to open source. And so, over the years, what maybe would have been highly classified 40 or 50 years ago, now is openly available to anyone who has both the interest and the resources to find it.
Now, could you explain to our audiences the various disciplines? We have HUMINT, we have SIGINT, we have IMINT, we have MESINT, and we have, as you talked about it quite a bit, OSINT now.
Sure. I'll try to keep this not dry and kind of boring, but I think for anybody who has read or watched spy movies over the years, you are probably familiar with one of the, if not the original collection mechanism for the IC, which is HUMINT. It's the collection of information via human sources. And all of the great spy movies dating back over the past 80 years really reflect this discipline, this collection capability. But over the years, what we've actually seen is the growth of upwards of 6 different types of collection disciplines within the IC. And so, as you alluded to, we have HUMINT, we have SIGINT, which is the collection of signals intelligence between, it can be between a person and an object or a device, or it can be between multiple devices. So think 2 different phones communicating and collecting the signals off of those. That's what signals intelligence is. And then we have something called imagery intelligence, and that is the collection of objects and the depiction of those objects, whether that's coming from certain satellite coverage that gives you an image, or whether that's something else from a satellite. It's really the depiction of those objects, for individuals to see, and then the sister or the partner to that capability is GeoInt, which is the capability to analyze what the objects are that the IMINT or the imagery intelligence collects. And so IMINT and GeoInt really go hand in hand. And then you have something called MESINT, which is the measurement, the study of and the intelligence of measurement and signals or signatures. And this is really critical for those of your viewers who have ever been interested in rockets or missiles and the trajectory of those objects from the point of launch into the atmosphere. Really being able to study what that trajectory looks like and how effective they are compared to previous launches. There's a lot of MESINT that goes into that. And then, of course, you have open source intelligence, which is the information that is derived from publicly and commercially available information. And that's obviously what I'm focused on right now. I have obviously leveraged all of those disciplines over the past 20 plus years, and they're all critically important. But right now, the focus for me is the practice of open source intelligence.
Right, but how would you explain to the average viewer the difference between open source intelligence and open source information?
Yeah, sure. So it's a fair question, and one that we get all the time. Anytime someone's going to go on the internet and look up something that they're interested in, they're going to find open source information. But that information may not be relevant to me as an intelligence analyst sitting here in Washington or anywhere, frankly, any capital around the world. What we're interested in, particularly in the United States, is information that is from publicly and commercially available sources that is directly relevant to, areas that we have an information need. And so if we have a gap in our understanding, or if we really are looking for a deeper insight into certain areas, we are really looking for information, regardless of where it comes from, that helps fill that gap or fit that need. And that's really what we do, is collect the open source intelligence aspect of that, and the information that perhaps we've reviewed or read, but we're not actually leveraging, and we're not actually bringing into our systems and then leveraging into informing policymakers. That's really the rest of the information. So that's the broader environment in which all information is out there. That's open source information.
Right. Some observers believe easy access to online information has, in a way, democratized intelligence, and then the investigative reporting group Bellingcat even claims to be an intelligence agency for the people. What are your thoughts on that? Is it a bit too far-fetched?
Well, in many ways, I think it is increasingly important, certainly over the last 10 years, for everyone to be more informed about the information that they are reading, to understand the credibility of the information that they are seeing on a day in and day out basis. And so, for some to talk about how OSINT is democratizing intelligence, I welcome that kind of a conversation. I think what Bellingcat has done in many cases is phenomenal. The work that those who are passionate about open source intelligence have done as part of the Bellingcat research capability, and the analysis that they have distributed is really, frankly, first rate. And in many ways, they have really hit on something that I think is increasingly important, which is making sure that information is increasingly available to those around the world, even in places where perhaps information is less easily accessible. And so, in many ways, what open source information and open source intelligence really reflects is a democratized version of intelligence, because we can all do some aspects of this work. I think what separates what we try and do from a government perspective and maybe what others do is the standards that we really try to adhere to in the work that we have. And certainly there are many journalism outfits out there that have phenomenal standards. And what we really are trying to do is make sure that the information that we provide is credible, it's timely, it's accurate, and it fits a common standard from a tradecraft perspective that people who see it can really rely on over time. And so, in many ways, what we try and do is a best practice, but I think what Bellingcat is doing, and others, frankly, in this space who are not in government, are doing a lot of the same type of activity. So it's not far-fetched in my mind to really use that term of democratizing intelligence.
Right. Now, if you allow me, I would like to go back very briefly to something that you said. So you said, you talked about the increasing use of commercial satellites in gathering intelligence. Now, how safe is this? Does the use and the reliance on commercial private satellites, in some ways, can the images that you're taking or downloading or filming be intercepted by your adversaries, and can you give them some sort of lead as to what you're interested in, the types of information that you're interested in gathering?
Sure. I mean, I think if you look back over the last 30 years, as commercial imagery has taken on even greater importance, it is providing the first indicators of activity, military activity or buildup on the borders of certain countries. It has been highly instructive to our understanding of North Korea. It has been incredibly helpful when it comes to natural disasters. So I think, the growth of the commercial imagery space, obviously, there's a lot here that has to do with GeoInt and IMINT, as we talked about before. But the fact that it's coming from that open source, that commercial space as well, it really shows, I think, the growing importance of the past 3 decades of relying on the brilliant innovators in the commercial sector around the world who, frankly, have the ability to bring to market capabilities that, like I previously alluded to, would have been highly classified decades ago. And now, because of the increasing availability and accessibility of this technology, everybody has it at their fingertips. And that should be something that everybody celebrates. That is a democratized capability that the Western world has really tried to deliver and provide to as a leading edge for everyone. And now we're seeing the benefits of that, not just in the United States, but around the world.
Right. Now, let's move on briefly to Ukraine. So the war in Ukraine has itself been an area where OSINT has shined over the last years, and the use of social media by soldiers on both sides of the conflict has been so prolific that some even analysts and commentators have referred to it as the first social media war. And if you remember going back as far back as January 2021, the Babel Street detected a noticeable rise in Russian anti-Ukrainian chatter across big data landscapes, and Telegram channels. So there was a couple of months before Russian troop movements began towards Ukraine. So what lessons are we drawing and learning from Russia's aggression on Ukraine when it comes to open source intelligence?
I think what we've learned over the past several years is how incredibly important open source information can be in not only providing warning, but providing day-to-day support to our allies and partners. And so, I think I'm not sure that I would call it the first social media war, although I can understand how others might do that. But I certainly think that the invasion of Ukraine, the war in Ukraine has demonstrated how a number of different ways in which open source information, commercial information, is changing the nature of war and warfare. And as a result, you have a greater ability to understand what your adversary is doing on a day in and day out basis. You can counter that activity by being more transparent with populations about your adversary's activities. We're able to help understand because we have increasing synergy and partnerships with our private sector, how the commercial space is really delivering incredible capabilities for us all in this space. They're helping provide infrastructure support and the open source information and intelligence that comes from our partnerships with industry allows us to then, as a partner with Ukraine, provide support much more rapidly. And I think that's really one of the lessons that we've taken over the last couple of years is a need to scale this capability on a more persistent basis, so that as we look forward, and obviously as we still keep a close eye and keen focus on supporting our allies in Ukraine, but obviously as we turn and look elsewhere, there is a strong need for delivering real-time insights into global activity, whether that's military force buildup, whether that's space activity, whether that is the movement of ghost ships around the world. There is a real opportunity to improve intel diplomacy and drive greater awareness between the U.S. and our partners much more rapidly, because we're relying more and more on open source information. And it's And it's not just open source information that individuals might, think of when they read their newspaper. But we're talking about, journals. We're talking about books. We're talking about databases. We're talking about the deep web. We're talking about a variety of capabilities here, as well as commercial information, which really has been a game changer over the last 15 to 20 years.
Right. Will there still be a need for for old school intelligence gathering, or will this go into oblivion?
No, we absolutely see there's going to be a long-term need for traditional, and I would say, kind of the bread and butter of what we do from an intelligence perspective. I think what is most important, in my experience, having served the National Security Advisor as well as the Director of National Intelligence over multiple administrations, is less concern about the sensitivity of the information and a much greater interest in the accuracy of the information and whether it is timely and relevant. And so there is always going to be a need for whatever information best serves the need of the decision maker at the time, and then how do we contextualize that information in a full story and really provide that robust picture for whether it's someone at the White House, someone in Congress, or the American people, or whether it's a warfighter out forward, or our intelligence community counterparts. We really try and put together, from an all-source perspective, the best picture possible, and that is always going to require many different types of collection. It's just right now what we're seeing is the growing appreciation and availability of the open source ecosystem, and what the U.S. is certainly trying to do now, as well as our partners, is build up our capability in this space so that we offer not just our decision makers, but our public, our taxpayers, a great return on investment with the taxpayer dollars that they are allowing us to spend in order to provide national security for the American people. And that's where we see a huge value proposition for the open source community to provide.
Right. As we are running out of time for this interview, I have one final question for you. Can you explain the significance and the responsibilities of your new role? You being the first IC OSINT executive. This by itself is a testament to how seriously the U.S. government takes, and the IC, how seriously they take open source intelligence, right?
Absolutely. But I think what's important to understand is that this position was really originated out of agreement between all 18 IC elements and the desire to see one place where overarching policy, guidance, resources, and certain types of activities were synchronized. Investments in the future were really synchronized on behalf of the entire IC. But my position is not and would not be sustainable or successful were it not for the partnerships that I have with, I would say, critically, CIA and the Defense Intelligence Agency. But beyond those two, which are the two primary partners that I have, there are 18 elements within the IC, the intelligence community here in the United States, that are all playing a part in this. And we have distributed multiple strategies over the past year, whether it's from State Department or the Army, or, like I said, DIA and ODNI and CIA, as well as others, that are all focused and concentrated on delivering for the American people and for our policymakers and for our partners and allies greater capability in the open source space.
Right. Jason Barrett, it was such a pleasure speaking to you. Thank you so much once again for your time.
Varun, thank you. It was a pleasure.
We ask the questions.
What is needed in the world?